Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Kate Carlisle joins the show today to talk about her book, Feathers and Flame, a poetry collection that weaves personal healing with the beauty of the Australian landscape. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Kate Carlisle has lived all over Australia, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia, sometimes in a double-decker bus or a caravan. That adventurous start shaped much of who she is today. She went on to serve nearly 39 years in the Australian Defence Force, with time in both the Navy and the Air Force. After leaving the ADF, Kate took part in the Arts for Recovery, Resilience, Teamwork, and Skills program, which supports veterans facing health and well-being challenges. That's where she discovered the healing power of creative writing and began blending it with her love of nature and the outdoors. These days, you'll often find Kate out in the Guru Yaru Nature Reserve, a place that grounds her and fuels her creativity. You can learn more about Kate Carlisle and her work at kcarlisleauthor.com. Well, hi, Kate. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Hi, Sherry. Very, very happy to be here, and I do appreciate the invitation. I feel very grateful that I'm being asked about my book.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn more about it and to talk with you about it. So why don't you get us started? Tell us what Feathers and Flame is about, and then what was your inspiration behind the collection?
Okay, so Feathers and Flame is very much about poetry in nature, and it was poetry from a perspective of me either walking through different areas that I was going through, whether it be the Botanic Gardens in Canberra, out at Ryu Nature Reserve out the front of my door, or just anywhere where I sat down and actually just wanted to look at what was going on around me and writing what I saw. Similarly, it also captures some sort of like journal-like entries where I'm sort of making commentary, but it's a bit longer. And then there's still poetry, but it's a longer prose and it goes into a lot of detail of what I'm seeing. And by going into detail, it provided greater connection with what I was seeing around me. But it's also very much about poetry of things that have, meaning to me. There's some poems in there related to my mum. I've got a poem in there from my grandfather and my grandmother's cousin. So, they're over 100 years old. And I thought that, especially with my grandfather's poem, that really played well in to do with service. And my mum was all about service to the community as well. So the inspiration behind the collection was after having attended the Australian Defence Force Arts Program, I really got a lot out of writing, and it provided me the opportunity to be quite reflective on things I had not looked at for a long, long time. And so, it just gave me the opportunity to write it down. And in writing that, sometimes I wrote poems and, I got so emotional that it just had such a healing part to it.
Yeah. Writing is very powerful, very powerful.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about the title. How did the title come up?
Come about. Sherry, I absolutely love birds. And in my poetry, there's a lot of connection with the native wildlife there, and a lot of it is birds. And Flame is all about renewal, rebirth. And when I was up in the Burdekin in far north Queensland, my spouse's father had a sugarcane farm, and the burning off of the cane was just so symbolic. And the flames were just massive, just enormous. But from flame, there's, like a new growth, renewal. And when I was up in the Pilbara, only in November 2024, the station that we were on, there was a storm, there was lightning, and it, caused a big scrub fire, actually about
Mm.
5 of them. And yeah, I just think the flame aspect is all about, yes, it can be dangerous, it can be damaging, but it's also very much provides the groundwork for renewal. So I thought Feathers and Flame was the perfect piece, a coming together of two different pieces.
Yeah, I love what you said about the flames. They're so mesmerizing. Did writing about these things kind of help you open up about your own life, or was it the other way around?
Oh,
How did your
gee.
connection with nature kind of shape?
Yeah. The total connection with nature was just an unconditional sense of connection, the ability to ground and just sit. Often I'd sit at the base of a couple of big trees or, just sit on a park bench and just sit and observe. And whilst, nature can be harsh in moments, there's just so much unconditional love. And so, how it shaped how I am is that it enabled me the ability to sit in stillness and observe. And through that observation, sitting there, I'd go up with, a pen and paper. I'd then
Mm,
just start noticing things. Sometimes I'd write a whole poem, like almost a first draft of a poem. But then there'll be times I'd just be writing about different situations that had happened. And by being in nature, it gave me a sense of openness and peace so that I could actually pause, to be able to stop, to reflect, and actually feel how some of those situations had me feel and be able to let it go and say, okay, those moments, those situations have brought me to where I am now. I mean, some of
yeah.
them absolutely memorable for the goodness that they were. And then, some things weren't always the greatest things, but it all shapes who you are. And I had that realization that, okay, these things have happened. I don't have to hang on to them. It's brought me to here. And that's where, one of my poems is called Shackled Box. And it was, forgiveness about all the circumstances, the situations, but also forgiveness of self. We can be so uncompassionate on each other and towards our own self. And yeah, it was about bringing compassion and love back and not, being so hard on self and blaming self for things, that sometimes were out of your control, but also recognizing the part that you played.
Yeah. You mentioned the poem Shackled Box, and there are other poems that are very personal. How do you decide what to share and what to keep private? How did you decide what was going to go in the book and what was just for you?
Yeah, well, there's a few poems that I didn't put in the book, but it was a real sense that I just had to own it.
Mm,
They were parts of me, of things, that had happened, like from when I was young. There are times where not always good things happen, but from something that's not so good, you can learn and you can grow from it. But there was also things that, I just packed away. I just didn't want anybody to know. And I just sort of felt a sense of shame, a sense of humiliation, betrayal. And they were things that I just hung on to for so long, but they can just eat you up. And I just had to look at some of these things, otherwise, I wasn't going to go forward on them.
yeah. So, what was it like going through those moments again? I imagine it was healing, but probably difficult as well.
Absolutely. So if I just go on, like, Shackled Box, it was very much opening up to, to what it was, and being fully transparent on, a whole lot of different circumstances and owning it rather than putting it away. Because, we can put so much energy into hiding things, even from our own selves, through denial or rejection, that you really have to make peace with yourself to actually get to know who you are. And
Yeah.
that was one of the beauties of being in nature,
Yeah.
because, getting to be compassionate about yourself and the circumstances that have taken you to where you are enables you to connect a whole lot of things in essence that you've been avoiding.
Mhm.
It's very much, nature. It's a true sense of connectedness, and everything is connected. And quite often we go about our daily lives in a disconnected state. We all wear shoes, we all wear gloves, especially in winter, right? So you get so rubbed up, and you're not walking on the earth. You're not holding onto or connecting what's going on that's, I guess, universal. Right,
Mm.
we close ourselves off so much, and
Yeah.
it's not just the emotion, it's about what's going on around you, actually having a look. There was a poem I wrote about tree, and it's all about the connectedness of a tree and what's going on in all those micro environments of the tree. And I just think it's a very, very powerful aspect that we are all interconnected. And,
Mhm.
I write in there, grubs and ants are abundant, beetles too, part of an environment usually not seen by you. So, what I'm trying to get at is, we go about life and we can just close off, getting in the car, going to work, getting into that mode of doing. And we've actually forgotten about what really does matter and what's going on around us.
Right, for sure. Was there a poem that surprised you when you were writing? Maybe the one that didn't come out the way you had intended?
Yeah, one of the poems that really surprised me was Crimson Rose. And it was a poem that I wrote because, I was thinking of my mum at the time, because my mum had passed away not long after I got out of the military. And I've got all these lovely roses and everything in the garden. And I was just sitting there, and I've got a photo of one of the roses that I was looking at.
Mm.
And I was just thought, well, a rose, they open, they close, but there's so much more complex and there's so much more beauty to them.
Yeah.
And, like the size, the softness, how in the morning it's all compact, and at the end, by the end of the day, it's just so open and so full of life, and the bees were going around it and everything like that. And, in the evening when I got out, the rose was starting to fold up again. And it just blew me away. And
Yeah.
so I'd written a couple of notes, and then it just came out like that. And another one was to do with the poem Love Grows. And with that poem Love Grows, I was just sitting down, I was up on Sammy's Hill, and I had my notebook there, and I was just thinking about all the different things that I love of, Sharon, my spouse. And I was just being reflective at all the different ways that Sharon expresses her love.
Mm.
And, you don't often always acknowledge those things, but they are there.
Right.
And yeah, it just came out on a piece of paper. And and Sharon read it and she just started crying. And I thought, okay, you know, just that expression of how I felt.
Yeah. It's magical the way the words just come out of us sometimes.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Now, you mentioned earlier different styles, and you've got poems and short reflections, and like you said, even journal like entries. What made you want to use these different styles?
It was a case of telling a story, really, because there are some poems in there that are personal, they're quite vulnerable, opening up to. And I just wanted to weave it into a story like a continuum
Mm.
of things can go on. And there were some things that were written quite short and they were perfect. And then there were elements like my poem about the Burdekin to try and describe the area, the detail, the burning of the cane, how the farmer tills the soil, the straight lines, the use of the harvesters. There was just so much in it that, yes, it ended up being a longer poem. And the journal entry about the Pilbara, that was just a magical time away. And that was just describing like one day, one evening, and the next morning of the day on the station with a couple of friends of mine. And so it doesn't do justice to the power and the beauty of the land or the people by sometimes having something short. And similarly, when I was in Antarctica, I've got a couple of short pieces in there and then I've got a longer piece. And the area is just magnificent.
Mm.
And there are times you just don't do an area justice with something that's short. But
Right.
similarly, something that's short can also be very powerful.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right.
it was a mix. It just helped it flow.
Yeah. Also, your poems are very visual. You also included full color landscape photos. And
Mm.
what role did imagery play in how you tell your stories?
I chose images that could bring out the heart and soul of what I was actually writing about.
Mm.
Because often a picture describes 1,000 words, right? And if you've got a picture of that moment where you're talking about, then I just thought it was invaluable to put them in because the poem, the sort of like journal entry of Pilbara Station that I put in there was of the cattle and that dry riverbed and the dirt and some of the scrub that was there. And the photo of down at the beach with the horses and the little calf Buddy, they were perfect because it reflected exactly what I was talking about. And there was a poem that I wrote that's about beaches, about getting in the sand. And I was with my dear friend Sue from when I was in the Navy, and we were in Manly Beach. And just that foam of your feet sinking in the sand, and the water is running past your toes, and the sand rubs over your toes. Well, I had a photo of that. And so
Mm.
a photo
Yeah.
can stand out on its own, but it can also be so complementary. And I wanted to just bring to life some of the imagery that I was describing.
Yeah, I love that. I notice a lot of your work balances opposites like grief and peace and stillness and change. Did you think about those contrasts while you were writing, or did they just kind of happen that way?
They were the emotion that I was feeling at the time that I was actually writing. Whatever you've been containing, and if you just keep holding it in, it's not good. And writing allows the opportunity to let it out. The power in doing that and feeling the emotion and allowing the emotion out allows you to grow. And so in the writing, they're great, beautiful poems, a lot of happiness and joy. But during a lifetime, there's periods of grief. Like my poem Red Envelope, that was heart wrenching. The emotion of that poem was, it was the morning my mum had passed away and I'd sent her this letter.
Mm.
And, I kept on, I said, Mum, have you got your letter? Because I was at my mum's bed. And, it hadn't come in. And I'd asked the nurses, I'd asked the admin people because, I'd flown from Canberra to be, at our, at mum's country town and at the hospital. And there were things in there that I had written that I wanted to be able to say to her.
Mm.
And, and I mean, I touched on a lot of it with her. But unfortunately, that letter never arrived. But the morning that Mum passed, at 9 o'clock in the morning, they said, "Oh, Kate, this is your letter." And oh my God, I just bawled in
Oh,
grief. Like it just ripped me apart because I just thought, oh my God, why couldn't this have been given to me, that first night I was there? But unfortunately, it
yeah.
wasn't. And so, yeah, so I've got this little red envelope that's in my little box of precious items. And when I'm ready, I'll open that again. So,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That gives me chills. Mm. The timing.
Yes, it
Yes.
was. But these things do happen and they're real.
Right.
And emotion and real, like I actually took a draft of my book when I went to Antarctica, and one of the ladies on the ship she said, okay, I'll have a read. And she was this lovely lady. She used to work in the airline industry. And about 45, 50 minutes later, the phone rings in our cabin. And she says, Kate, you've got to come down to our cabin. So, Sharon and I toddle on down there. And she says, Kate, I have not laughed, I have not cried, I have not felt so many of these feelings. And she just thought that was beautiful because it gave a whole lot of emotions, like, emotion about having lost a parent that you love so dearly. It had her think about, what had occurred in her life and being reflective on her life as you went through things.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah,
I bet that felt amazing, huh?
Absolutely, because it's real. And, life is about going through ups and downs. It's about having your challenges. But from that challenge, you just grow so much. But sometimes it takes time and you
Mm,
don't appreciate what that circumstance is or the situation and some of the actions or non actions of something that's occurred. And time is one of the greatest things because in the moment you may be lost, you may be distraught, but somehow from that you step forward, and that is a powerful thing in itself.
right.
Being able to step through the challenge and grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to ask about your background a little bit too. You mentioned your career in the Australian Defence Force. How did your career influence your writing?
Well, a lot of my lifetime had been in the Defence Force. I joined when I was 16 years of age. I was an apprentice in the Royal Australian Navy. And, when I joined, I was so naive to the world. I was so innocent, so impressionable, and defence shaped who I was from when I was a minor to
Mm,
becoming a young adult, being in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and then my 50s. The different circumstances, the different experiences, going on military operations in support of military exercises, for national disasters as well. So it shapes who you are. And when you grow up within defence, things do change and you have a different position on how you want to, I guess, be remembered for what you want to do. And for me, I wanted to be able to look back and see how many people I helped rather than looking forward and seeing where I could get to because, there's no value in that. I just couldn't see the sense of getting somewhere without actually helping people.
yeah. Wow. And now, after you retired, you took part in the Arts for Recovery program. And
Hmm.
that's kind of where you discovered your love of writing or the healing power of writing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, the 80th Arts program was a 4 weeks residential program. And for me, I'd only been out, I think, about 7 months before I commenced that program. And creative writing was one of the things that we could do. And the two ladies who taught us, one is an amazing poet herself, and one is a fiction author herself. And, they were professors at the, University of Canberra.
Mm.
And they were so fun to work with. And they had knowledge and they had experience. And oh my God, it was one of the best 4 weeks I had. And going through the course of writing different styles, different things, it was a huge emotional outlet. Like the six of us who were doing creative writing, we all experienced with some of our writing just an enormous shedding of emotion.
Mm.
And I really got to see the power of writing and what it can do. And so, writing, not only was it helping us, it was listening to, my other colleagues who were reading out their work, how powerful it was, the emotion, the vulnerability. And by being vulnerable, it really opens you up to, essences of who you are and the things that you've held on for so long. and the enormity of some things, whereas when you can write it down and look at it and reflect upon it, you can use it as a platform to step forward from.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a wonderful program.
Oh, amazing.
I love those types of experiences where you get together with people and form that bond while you're learning something new and creating something wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, the process and the structure was just perfect. It was a safe environment, a respected environment, and it gave us the ability to retrust that it's okay to be able to sit in, look at a lot of emotions that we hadn't expressed for a long, long time.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a poem with us today.
Yeah, sure. I've got one. I've just opened up the page and it fell to me. So this one's called Mirror Me, and it's on page 41 of my book. I
Okay.
look into the mirror. I do not recognize me. Aspects reflect even good humour I see. The mirror is whole and reflects glimpses of my soul, not the fractures of what I've carried, not the past, not the aspects that need to depart. The mirror shows much and nothing at all. The mirror shows now and encourages me to take a bow. Within is my essence, my spark, which, across my years, kept away all that was dark. My soul stirs to release aspects of me to make things right. I breathe deep and invite the light. My new space fills with compassion and grace. There is no victim or loneliness I used to embrace. I own who I am. I accept the inherent cost. I stand no longer with tears of regret, a mirror of me that is easier to accept. My love and gratitude to those aspects departed. You
That's
know,
beautiful.
yeah, so that poem, I'd gone up to Newcastle and I was waiting for breakfast to be delivered. And I was sitting outside on the veranda, and it was just a beautiful sunny day. And I'd been at the mirror, I'd just combed my hair, and I just sat there and wrote that in about 10 minutes before dinner came. I mean, obviously, I worked on it a little bit, but that was the essence of it.
Yeah.
But I've got another little short one on page 45. It's called Storm. Windswept storm uncannily keeps me warm. Strength and sheer lead to things torn. Buildings, trees, plants, birds, and animals alike. The loss, the grief, but time that brings change, renewal, growth, hope. So
Wow.
that was quite reflective of, Australia's been having so many storms, and there's different areas all around the world, in the US, over in Italy, many places, Pakistan's had big storms and floods and, in the past years as well. But in all those natural disasters, it takes time and it does bring change. It brings individual change, personal change, community change. But importantly, there's renewal, there's growth, but there's always hope. And that came from support of those sorts of activities.
Right. What do you hope people feel or come away with after reading Feathers and Flame?
The real big one is that it's okay. It's well and truly okay to have things go wrong in your life. The real big thing is that, no matter that situation or the circumstance, the choice is always yours as to how you want to move forward from it.
Mm.
And, if you've ignored something or if you've opted to do nothing, they're all choices. But rather than be blaming on yourself or, blaming others, recognize that in that self discovery, well, one of the things for me that, in a lot of things, I did have a bit of a part to play in whatever it was.
Hmm.
And trying to hold on to and hide things and keep things hidden, it ends up eating you alive inside out over many, 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 many years. And they were things that I no longer wanted to carry. But the only person who can determine your self worth is you.
Hmm.
It's so powerful to own who you are and start living the things that you want to do and valuing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kate, what is next for you? Will you write more books?
Yeah, I've already written a couple of new poems, and, I had a number of other poems that I had written, but I didn't put in the book. It's actually poems from the perspective of the animals and the creatures themselves.
Oh, I
So,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've got a poem about a Gould mouse, and I called it Henry Gould. Henry is the mouse, and it's an Australian native mouse that people thought were extinct, but it was recently found that it's not extinct. And it's about this mouse and it's living that, it doesn't want to die, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was also approached about turning my book into an audio book. So that is something that I am considering right now.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, Kate, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us today?
The biggest thing is be compassionate with yourself. Go outside, take your shoes off and put your feet in the grass, in the dirt, in the sand, sit beneath a tree and just give yourself the opportunity to be in the moment. It's amazing what you can feel. It
Yeah.
gives you what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Kate, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about yourself and your work. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you are most welcome, Sherry. I'm most grateful to have had the opportunity to be on your show. And so thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Kate Carlisle, author of Feathers and Flame. You can learn more about Kate and her work at kcarlisleauthor.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.